This is Allan Licthman. He earned his PhD at Harvard, has been a history professor at American University for multiple decades, and is a lifelong competitive athlete.
I was actually Submasters North American steeplechase champion way back in 1979. I'm still going strong. I qualified in the 1,500 meter run and the 800 meter run for the National Senior Olympics next year.
While achieving acclaim in both athletics and academia, this isn't what Allan is best known for. Licthman's biggest claim to fame is correctly predicting 9 presidential elections, which includes being one of the few forecasters who correctly predicted a Trump victory in 2016. But Allan's predictions are not made by subjective feelings or wishful opinions. Instead, he developed a methodical forecasting model named the 13 Keys. Each key presents a statement that must be determined as either true or false, and a true key is awarded to the incumbent party, whereas a false key is awarded to the challenging party. To develop the system, the professor analyzed every election since 1860.
Of course, the keys have been answered prospectively from 1984 to the present, and retrospectively in development all the way back to the horse and buggy days of politics when Abraham Lincoln was elected in 1860.
The professor made the 13 Keys model very accessible to the public. From appearing on cable news,
my next guest, known as the Nostradamus of U.S. elections for correctly predicting 9 of the last 10 presidential races, American University history professor Allan Licthman joins me now.
Meeting with popular YouTubers.
So he's on a 9-game winning streak. And with that being said, my guest today, Allan Licthman. Allan, thank you so much for being a guest on Valuetainment.
Guest appearances on late-night comedy shows, to in-depth books, and even scheduled live streams with his son.
Every Tuesday and Thursday, I have a live show with my son on YouTube. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern, Tuesdays and Thursdays, at Allan Licthman YouTube.
With this abundance of information at hand, I attempted to forecast the keys myself in a recent video. The video performed fairly well, earning over 350,000 views at the time of this writing. But there is one problem. While the audience enjoyed the video, the professor was not amused. Instead, my use of the 13 keys was all wrong. In an email exchange, Licthman stated, "I started listening to your post, but it was so off base that I stopped." Ouch. But despite my errors, Licthman was kind enough to join me for an interview, right in the middle of his busy season.
Thank you so much, and you're right, I'm unbelievably busy.
We chatted for almost an hour, discussing the correct way to use the keys. With the professor's guidance, let's take a closer look at the keys and correctly forecast this election. If you want to follow along and judge the keys for yourself, the professor has one piece of advice. In order to forecast the election correctly, you must remove your own personal bias.
Be self-aware. Continue to monitor your own thinking and continue to say, am I making calls because I have a preference this way, or am I making a call based upon the objective keys and the evidence?
Forecasting the 13 keys has the same challenge as making videos. It is nearly impossible to find unbiased sources. Expecting major news outlets to provide unbiased coverage is unrealistic. Media prioritizes political bias and sensationalism over objectivity and honest reporting. And with social media algorithms, it is quite easy to get trapped into an echo chamber that just reinforces your own bias. But there is a tool that helps you break through the bias. Ground News is an app and website designed to add transparency in a biased media landscape. They gather the world's news in one place and pull data on each source's political lean, credibility, and even ownership. So we can see how these factors influence their framing of the same story. And all of this is presented in one seamless experience, both on desktop and mobile. Let me show you one example. Trump recently challenged Nebraska's election law that awards electoral college votes by district, as opposed to the more common winner-take-all system. With Ground News, you can see that over 100 sources have covered this story, most of which are left-leaning or centrist. With 71% of these sources being rated as highly factual, you can see that one right-leaning source claims, Nebraska GOP senator opposes electoral college change that may have helped Trump win re-election, while a left-leaning source declares, Nebraska GOP state senator rejects Trump push to rig Electoral College. As you can see, there's a ton of bias in both headlines, and Ground News makes that easy to identify. One of my favorite features is their blind spot feed, which shows you stories underreported by one side of the political spectrum. For example, if you lean right, you probably missed this story on Trump not releasing his medical records. Following the blind spot feed has definitely helped me see stories I normally wouldn't have seen, and Ground News helps me to understand why I may not have seen them. If you want to break out of your echo chamber and be well informed of the entire political spectrum, this is probably a good tool for you. I've used Ground News well before this sponsorship, and it will continue to be a valuable asset in my future videos. And Ground News is offering 40% off their Vantage plan to viewers who scan my QR code, or by going to ground.news/Pike. This is the same Vantage plan I use for unlimited access to their site. By subscribing, you're accessing a better way to read the news, and using my link helps support this channel. A big thank you to Ground News for sponsoring this video. Now, let's analyze Licthman's 13 keys and forecast this election. While there is an odd number of keys, it is not a system where whoever wins the most keys wins.
If 6 of my 13 keys are false, the incumbent parties are predicted loser. Fewer than 6 false keys, they are a predicted winner. So it's 6 strikes and you're out, fewer than 6 strikes and you're in, and the keys are always phrased. So an answer of true favors the White House party, an answer of false favors their defeat. And so the keys are always measured against the White House party, up or down.
For Trump to win, he only needs 6 keys. And for Harris to win, she needs at least 8 keys. Now let's analyze the keys. Key number 1, party mandate. After the midterm elections, the incumbent party holds more seats in the House of Representatives than it did after the previous election. This key is objectively false. While the Republicans underperformed in the 2022 midterms, they still gained 9 seats in the House. This key is awarded to Trump. Key number 2, contest. There's no serious contest for the incumbent party nomination. The Democrats nearly lost this key when Biden withdrew from the race.
I was very critical of the Democrats for openly trashing their sitting president, right in public. I've never seen that before. And I thought they were heading for a potential disaster. Somehow they grew a spine and a brain, united behind Harris.
Since the Democrats swiftly united around Harris after Biden's withdrawal, this key is true and awarded to Harris. Key number 3, incumbency. The incumbent party candidate is the sitting president. This key switched when Biden dropped out of the race. As the sitting president is no longer running, this key is false and awarded to Trump. Key number 4, third party. There is no significant third party or independent campaign. In Licthman's analysis, third parties always hurt the incumbent party. For a third-party candidate to be considered significant, they need to win 5% of the vote. As such, polling data plays a far bigger role in this key, but third-party candidates typically receive less votes than polling would indicate, and therefore need to be polling at 10% near election day to be considered significant. As RFK suspended his campaign and endorsed Trump, it is highly unlikely that he, or any other single third-party candidate, will meet the 10% threshold. As such, this key is true and awarded to Harris. Key number 5, short-term economy. The economy is not in a recession during the election campaign.
For this key, it's a purely quantitative key, that there is no recession during the election year.
While there certainly is economic anxiety about inflation, cost of living, home ownership, the vibe session, and numerous other economic complaints, none of these factors are relevant in the 13 keys model. This key simply inquires if there is a recession during the election year. Nothing more, nothing less. When pressed on the public's perception of the economy, Licthman remained firm.
And you're not the only one to try to redefine the key. in terms of public perception? And my answer is twofold. Number one, if you want to develop your own prediction system based on public perception, go right ahead. I encourage it. Of course, none of my critics have ever done that or have any track record of predicting elections. But I stress this on every one of my keys. If you want to use my system, you have to be consistent with how the keys are defined.
As the economy grew in the first 2 quarters of 2024, the economy will not be in a recession on election day. As such, this key is true and awarded to Harris. Key number 6. Long-term economy. Real per capita economic growth during the incumbent's term equals or exceeds mean growth during the previous 2 terms. In short, this key compares Biden's economy against Trump's, as well as the economy during Obama's second term. And the metric that matters is GDP per capita, all adjusted for inflation, of course. For Kamala Harris to win this key, GDP per capita growth under Biden needs to be equal or greater than that of his 2 predecessors. The economy was chugging along nicely during Obama's second term, and GDP per capita grew by almost $3,500. When Trump took office, the economy was even better, and it appeared to be unstoppable. But then the pandemic caused a recession, negating a reasonable amount of economic growth. Despite the pandemic, GDP per capita under Trump still grew by nearly $3,000. Biden was sworn into office at the right time. The pandemic recession was over, and once vaccines became available, the economy soared. Under Biden, GDP per capita grew by nearly $4,500. Biden's economy towers over that of his 2 predecessors.
Real per capita growth under Biden is at least double that of the average of the previous 2 terms. So, any fine point recently doesn't matter.
As such, this key is true and awarded to Harris. Key number 7. Policy change. The incumbent administration affects major change in national policy. The Biden administration passed a major tax and spend bill titled the Inflation Reduction Act, also known as the IRA. The entire bill is 274 pages long. Covering the entirety of the IRA would easily take an hour. In short, the massive bill increases tax revenues and government expenditures, and leaves a surplus to address America's growing debt. The IRA covers a hodgepodge of issues important to the Democratic Party, such as investments in green energy infrastructure, new pollution regulations, negotiates drug prices for Medicare, imposes a minimum tax for corporations, hires nearly 90,000 IRS agents, and much, much more. The bill was highly partisan, and the Senate was in a 50-50 tie along party lines. In these scenarios, the Vice President is authorized to break a tie in the Senate. As VP, Kamala Harris was the deciding factor that brought the IRA into law.
On this vote, the yeas are 50, the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative and the motion to proceed is agreed to.
Whether the IRA is good or bad for the US is not relevant to this exercise. What is relevant is that it was a major change in US national policy.
And mind you, it's just policy change. It's not whether the policies are good or bad or popular or not popular. The key is very specific. I don't think there's any controversy that Biden administration's policies are quite a change.
Given that the Biden administration led major changes in national policy, this key is true and awarded to Harris. Key number 8. Social unrest. There's no sustained social unrest during the term. This key has a high threshold. To qualify, social unrest must be widespread and sustained. Examples that meet this threshold would be the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, anti-Vietnam and race riots in the late 60s, and the Bonus Army protest in 1932. While Biden did experience some social unrest in regards to the Israel-Gaza conflict, this does not meet the standards of this key.
We saw the fizzling of protests, nothing like 1968 reemerging in the Democratic convention this year, and no massive sustained social unrest outside the convention.
With that said, this key is true and awarded to Harris. Key number 9. Scandal. The incumbent administration is untainted by major scandal. While it is undeniable that Hunter Biden has been a scandal machine, this reality does not impact the key. The key specifically refers to scandals originating from the administration, not their family members.
It has to directly implicate the president, not the president's son.
While it would be fair to say that some scandals occurred during the Biden administration, none of them reached the high threshold to turn this key false.
And there has to be at least some bipartisan recognition of scandal. You know, during the Clinton scandal, the Monica Lewinsky scandal, a lot of Democrats were very critical of Clinton, thought he had engaged in wrongdoing, even though they didn't believe it rose to the level of an impeachable offense. And obviously, during the Trump scandals, there were quite a few Republicans who were very critical of Trump. Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger. It wasn't just the Democrats.
As none of Biden's scandals reach this high threshold, this key turns true and is awarded to Harris. Key number 12. Incumbent charisma. The incumbent party is charismatic or a national hero. The 13 keys demand a high threshold for charisma. To earn this key, Harris would need to be a generational talent of charisma with multi-partisan appeal.
Once in a generation, truly inspirational across the board, broadly transformational candidates, the iconic examples, FDR on the Democratic side, Reagan on the Republican side. And, you know, since 1900, there have only been half a dozen candidates fitting this definition. And I don't think there'd be much dispute who they are. They're not William Howard Taft and Gerald Ford. They're Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Dwight Eisenhower because he was a national hero, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and Barack Obama in 2008. That's it.
As Kamala Harris is not a generational talent of charisma, this key is false and awarded to Trump. Key number 13. Challenger charisma. The challenging party candidate is not charismatic, nor a national hero. The same standards apply to this key. For Trump to be considered charismatic, he must have historic levels of charisma with multi-partisan appeal. While Trump certainly excites his base, he easily lacks multi-partisan appeal.
Assuming Trump is a good showman, he doesn't fit the criteria for the key because he appeals to a narrow base.
Given that Trump lacks bipartisan appeal, this key is awarded to Harris. And with that, we can forecast Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States, and the Democrats will remain in the White House. For those keeping score at home, you may have noticed that 2 keys have gone unanswered. One key asks if the incumbent administration achieved a foreign or military success, and the other key asks if they suffered a foreign or military failure. In this election, these keys become irrelevant given that a winner was already determined, which is fortunate because these keys are difficult to judge in this election.
Wars are raging. Wars are fluid. It's hard to know how the vicissitudes of war are going to proceed. But I still had to call them, but they, as I've said, and you've probably heard, these were the only 2 really shaky, difficult keys to call. None of the other keys were hard to call. Even if they both flipped against the White House party, that would still be a deficit of 5 keys, not enough to predict their defeat. And ultimately, I decided, and I think this is accurate, to split them. I nailed the incumbent administration for a major failure in Gaza, where there is a horrible humanitarian crisis with no end in sight. We don't have boots in the ground there, but as you know, we're heavily invested in what's going on in the Middle East. And then I gave the administration a success for Ukraine because it was Biden and Biden alone, not Macron, not Trudeau, not Merkel, who put together the coalition of the West that stopped Putin from conquering Ukraine and then going on to threaten NATO allies. And continued support has enabled Ukraine to survive for more than 2.5 years and even to make incursions into Russia. And the Democrats and the independents are very much behind it. So overall, the American people are supportive of Ukraine.
In my own independent analysis, I determined that the withdrawal of Afghanistan was a failure. I asked Licthman why he didn't reach the same conclusion.
Well, I contemplated that, but I didn't have to make a decision on that because I gave him a failure anyway.
Yeah, fair.
That was a tough one. But, Gaza is such an obvious failure. I didn't have to make a decision on Afghanistan.
Regardless, this will not have an impact on the election, as the rest of the keys were easy to call. And if you jump to the end of the video just to see the prediction and not the analysis, skip to this point in the video to see the final prediction. If you want to help support the future of this channel, consider joining on Patreon to enjoy early, ad-free access to all future videos. And don't forget to see Allan Licthman's live streams every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find a link to the show below.